industry on their experiences leading newsrooms during trying times, what they're looking for in managers they recruit, and their goals, increasing the number of leaders of color in their newsroom.
So, one of the things I hate most on these panels is when I have to sit and listen to someone else read my professional bio while I sit there like a dope. So I have asked everyone to introduce themselves, which I've now learned is Rashida's least favorite way.
It's my fun fact.
I apologize to you, but we're going to go around.
Absolutely. Rashida Jones, president of MSNBC.
Kim Godwin, president of ABC News.
Noah Oppenheim, president of NBC News.
And Neeraj Khemlani, president, co-head of CBS News and Stations.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. I was thinking that there are 5,000 of us gathered for this conference. And Kim and I were having this conversation earlier. When NABJ started in 1975, 44 black journalists gathered in Washington, D.C. When NABJ started in 1982, 300 journalists gathered in San Diego. And for those people, this moment, this space, these leaders, that was their hope and their dream for our profession. So before we move on to our conversation, I'd like for us to love on these people, these leaders who are the hope and the dream for the people who started these organizations back in the day.
Let me blow on you.
All right, so our first question, and this is a round robin, and Rashida, will start with you.
Okay.
The world is clawing its way out of a pandemic. We've had a rash of gun massacres in recent months, some of them racially motivated. Ukraine is at war, Russia, and we are heading into a global recession. Not to mention we have the midterms and 2024 elections. Slow news cycle. How do you decide what to prioritize in terms of coverage, and how do you set the stakes for viewers?
Sure, so I think you have to have a balance. There are stories that, from a public service standpoint, we all have to cover. We are doing a service to the audience to bring these stories to light. And so I think there's a portion of our coverage, and that portion evolves every day, that are the stories that are must-do that kind of fall into that public service realm. And then I think there are stories that you do because they're important to tell. And they may not be popular stories, they may not be well-covered stories, but I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to bring some of those stories to light. To bring stories to light about underrepresented communities, for example. To bring stories to light that involve people who we may not see often or may not see often in that capacity. And so again, I think as leaders, it's important for us to ensure that we're covering both of those types of stories and balancing it, but ultimately putting it through the lens of what's most important for the audience.
Everything that is important to humanity right now is at stake. And so I really think that our profession is so pivotal to the future of this country. Cornerstone of democracy, but it's really important what we're doing right now. So as all of these stories evolve, we have to decide how and why and where and when we're going to show up for all of these communities affected by these big stories, right? So for instance, in Uvalde, it came a few weeks after Buffalo. Uvalde, we get there, and we all have been through this. I'll even start coming here, driving into Las Vegas. When I saw the Mandalay Bay Hotel, I had a visceral reaction because the last time I was here, I was covering that story when the guy was killing people from the room, right? And I had this reaction because that was a story where, as a journalist in the field, I was an anchor producer at that time. That was the story that I had to say, hold up. I had to call in and say, I can't do this, the next one, because I had done the previous 5, Orlando Pulse, all the way back to Connecticut. So I know the mental health issues that come with covering all of these disasters and one story after the other. So, now we're in that same kind of news cycle, and the audience is in that same kind of news cycle as well. So we have to, one, yes, be on top of it, cover them, but also care for these communities. In Uvalde, for instance, I said, look, we always get in and get out. In 3 days, we're on to the next story. That's the news cycle. And so we've committed to staying in Uvalde for the next year. When we're calling it Uvalde 365. It's because those communities need us. You know, they will be forgotten if we just move on to the next story. We need to be there to document that struggle and to remind America why it's important for us to focus on the issues that are at hand.
Yeah, I think Kim is right. I think people are overwhelmed. I think our newsrooms are overwhelmed, and I think the audience is overwhelmed by the number of challenges that are in the world today. I think it's our responsibility to help people make some sense of it all, to help people put what's happening in context, hopefully to guide people towards some vision of a better future and solutions. And I think we do it in a number of ways. I think, you know, every one of us on this stage, in some ways, we're competitors. We're all going to cover the big headlines, the big stories that break through. When we do that, I think each one of our news organizations distinguishes themselves on the margins of those stories. What are the unique angles that we find? What are the unique characters that we give a voice to? And then I think the second big category, beyond those big headlines that break through everywhere, are what are the stories that each one of our organizations are going to uncover? What are the stories that the audience is not yet aware of that we're going to go out and dig for and find? You know, at NBC News, we try to do it, try to drive that process a number of ways. This past year, every week we chose some facet of American life that we decided to harness a bunch of resources across all of our various platforms and really dig in. So whether it was the mental health crisis that this country's youth is facing in our series Kids Under Pressure, or whether it's gun violence, or whether it's the dangers of social media, we said every week we're going to just choose to really dig into one of these forces that is shaping American life and try to look for answers. So I think that's our responsibility, is to help people not just flood them with the chaos, but to help them make sense of it all.
I guess I'll just pick up on making sense of it all. And, you know, when you look at all of these stories that you guys mentioned, more and more so they're connected. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at Ukraine, and you look at the war there, and you look at the impact on supply chain, and you look at the impact of supply chain on inflation and jobs and inequality, it's all connected. And I think that all of us work hard on bringing those strands together, to giving smart takes on the interdependency of all of these stories. And as Kim mentioned, you know, the commitment and long-term, you know, commitment to these stories is also something, you know, that we like to stress. You know, we have Jericka Duncan on the Buffalo story because she spent a lot of her time there. And she goes back there and back there. And we have Lilia, you know, in Uvalde and going back there. And we've brought back this sort of granddaddy of brands at CBS News, at CBS Reports, and that'll come together as a documentary to provide context of all of these external forces through the eyes of a single community. So bringing them all together, I think, is the hard part and the necessary part.
Lilia Luciano's reporting out of Uvalde has been absolutely exceptional. Kim, I'm going to start with you, but then feel free to jump in. We don't, you know, we'll call everyone by name, but this is all happening against the backdrop of a lack of faith in institutions across this country, ours among them. You've seen the Gallup poll. Only 11% of people surveyed said they have faith in television news. That puts us above Congress, but below big business. So not exactly where you want to be. I mean, how then do you think about that question? What do those numbers tell you? What does that mean about what you have to offer your viewer?
I think it first tells us to keep going. I will tell you, media bashing is America's favorite pastime. However, when the rubber hits the road, they are with us. Yeah. They need us. I think, you know, to see evidence of that, look at the pandemic and how we've covered it. America needed that, and they were around the television set, around their computers, on the phones, getting the information they needed from us. And all of the numbers rose. So I think, we've got to block out that noise, because that isn't why we do this. It isn't to get numbers and figure out polls. It really is a passionate desire to provide information to the people of America that need it. That's what our profession is all about. And so that's what we do at ABC News. We just block out the noise, and we've got to do what we need to do every single day to bring important stories to the forefront. I'll just leave it there. But we just try to block that out and just keep going. I know that provides perspective, where Americans are and that kind. But if you're relevant, your news is relevant and relatable. We're talking to the people of America about things that they need to know and things that are important to them and their families. That's what we have to focus on.
But it does mean we're working in an environment where Gen Z, for example, will go on TikTok and they will put in search terms to learn about stories because they trust strangers on TikTok more than they trust institutions. It means they'll go on YouTube, right? Latinos disproportionately get their news and information from YouTube. So I wonder, as an ecosystem of news and information, how you think then it changes our place in it?
Well, I think that we have to be in all those places. Yeah. I'm a big advocate for not ceding that space to I call it to the crazies, to the misinformation and disinformation. We can't cede the space. So Ian Panel, who is covering the war in Ukraine, is also doing TikToks. Rachel Scott, who's covering Congress, is also doing TikToks. Like, we're trying to reach viewers anywhere, anytime, on any platform. Wherever they are, that's where we need to be. And so, yeah, that changes the way we look at things, is we have to meet Americans where they are to provide the news program. But in terms of what we do, the standard, the straightforward approach is the same.
The only thing I would add to that, just looking at this room, and almost everyone in here works in a newsroom or works close to a newsroom in some capacity, I think it just puts the responsibility on every single one of us as storytellers, as truth tellers, as information seekers. We have to quote you, Kim, block out the noise and do the job that, forget about where you work, do the job that we as journalists are charged to do. If you're in this room, if you're at this conference, you're serious about your craft, you're serious about the work that you do. And I think it's on all of us to contribute to restoring that faith, because we're all here for the public service.
The lack of faith isn't just in us, though. It's also in the U.S. government, about which we report on. So how are you thinking about framing the stakes of a big midterm election set against the backdrop of the January 6th hearings?
Sure, I'm happy to start on that one. I will just say I have twin 16-year-olds, so TikTok's a conversation at home at dinner. And some of it I want to see, some of it I don't want to see. But I just love it when my twins tell me they learned something from our brand on TikTok. It's important for us to all get our credible brands out there for the next generation. No matter how they want to consume it. Mm-hmm. On the midterms piece, I've been in this role for about a year now, and our first priority was to really invest in our Washington bureau, led by Mark Lima now, and Finn Gomez is our political director, and to really increase the diversity of that team, as well as adding reporters that can continue to break news, and not just from our own field. So, Robert Costa is a Washington Post writer. Scott McFarland came from local. And part of our new CBS News and Stations, which was put together by our CEO, George Cheeks, and his vision, was really to tap into our local reporters on the ground in our communities. Local news has enormously high trust rankings.
Even newspapers.
Even newspapers. And with the news deserts that are being created, the onus on our local news operations to cover stories so that people are not just voting red or blue across the entire slate, but understand the nuanced work and hold local politicians accountable, is now even more important for us as an organization.
Neeraj, I'm glad that you brought up diversity, because that's something we're going to get to in a little bit, how you all as new leaders see that in your organizations and what that looks like. So we're going to talk amongst ourselves for about an hour and then open up to the audience for questions. the last half hour of our conversations. This question is directed first to Kim and Neeraj, but anyone can answer it. Kim, you mentioned earlier about mental health, the strain on the nation. What are you doing as leaders to meet the needs of your staff who are feeling overwhelmed, strained, exhausted?
This is really a big push of mine, is to pay more attention to that. Like I said, driving up here, I had a reaction from a story many years ago. So I understand what that feels like and what it means. I'm a big advocate, and you guys know this, for work hard, play hard. You know, I mean, we are there working 18, 20-hour days. My phone is ringing constantly. I am a big advocate in reaching out to staff members, talking to people all the time. How are you feeling? Our executive producers are, you know, I'm calling the people in the field at war. Leadership is about that, investing in your people and taking the time to find them where they are, ask them how they're doing, et cetera. So I do a lot of that, but I also talk about vacation, taking a break, and the ability to walk away when you need to walk away for a few days, a week, or whatever. And the strength of the organization needs to fill in those gaps. If you can't walk away from a job, then we're doing something wrong. And the first thing I asked our executive producers was, who are you training to replace you? Who in your organization are you training to replace you? That doesn't mean that I want you to go anywhere. I love you. Yes.
I was saying, like, damn.
Yes. No, but that is a responsibility as a leader, right? You know, why we are here to train our replacements. And that makes a healthier organization. Why? Because I was that person many times that never got the shot, the chance, the opportunity to do, because there was somebody ahead of me who just wanted to be, you know, big person on campus. And you have got to, you know, that's not good for the organization. And so as a leader now, I can make a change in that and say, hey guys, you've got to train the people behind you. Why? That gives them more responsibility. It makes them feel great about coming to work. It gives them more of a chance to show what they can do. And then when that person moves up, when you're not here, then somebody can move into their spot and somebody can move into their spot. And before you know it, everybody is getting cross-trained and feeling good about, you know, coming into work. Yes, and feel like you're investing in them. Right? So that's what that's about. And then you can go on vacation. That's my bottom line. Right. You can go on vacation and you've trained somebody to fill in. And then that's what a strong organization does.
Right. Your thoughts about that, correct? Because we all grew up in a culture where it was a badge of honor. I worked 4 days without sleep.
Yeah.
How do you now meet the mental health needs of your...
Yeah. 4 days?
At least 3, brother.
Look, well-being and mental health is critical. And when you talk, and when I go out to London and talk to our reporters who are going in and out of Ukraine, when you've got reporters who are sleeping on the first floor of safe houses because they need to get out of the first sign of trouble, that's emotional trauma. When you have reporters who are covering, school shooting after school shooting after school, that is trauma. And so there are obviously, all of the mental health resources that we bring out. But one of the things that we find is that not only do you have the impact, that trauma that Kim was talking about, coming here and remembering all of it, but particularly on the school shooting piece, you felt powerless because no matter how much coverage we're giving, things are not changing. And so how do you empower our teams to drive more impact? And so one of the things we did was, across news and stations, we set out on a big investigative project that was a data journalism project. And what we found was that the murder close rates all across the country are at a 50-year low. And why is that? Behind all the noise of what's going on gun violence, and so giving the teams the opportunity to go do that and make an impact helps lift the entire organizations. Same thing with formula for babies. A lot of our reporters are like, it's okay to cover this. It could have been a 30-second tell. But they went on and on day after day until they saw change. And so there's that redeeming quality of what we're all about that really helps cope with the trauma. It doesn't erase it, but it does give you a little bit of a release.
Yeah.
No, I want to pivot to the conversation that is ongoing in our industry around linear and streaming. And I will say 10 years ago, I was hired at HuffPost Live, which was the first streaming news network. And I say that to say we've been having this conversation for more than a decade. So it's not a new conversation. Do you have a sense of where the audience is? Do you have a sense of what the audience wants? And how, as we continue the move to streaming, that then has you rethinking how you, sorry, that really distracted me, how you reshape your content, right? Like, where do people want opinion? Where do they want perspective? And what do they want to watch on live television that isn't breaking news or sports?
Sure. So I think Kim said it first, which is that all of us want to be everywhere, that people are looking for news and information. So I think every one of our organizations have initiatives where, NBC News, I think, is the largest TikTok account right now. NBC News Now has been our big play into streaming. To your point, it's hard to time this thing perfectly, but I think that we absolutely are at a moment now where a critical mass of people is looking for news and information from credible journalists on streaming platforms. And so with NBC News, what we've done is we launched News Now in 2019. We made a decision to make it free, and we made a decision to make it ubiquitous. So you can find it anywhere. You can find it on YouTube if you're searching there for news. You can find it on a smart TV. You can find it on Apple TV, you name it. And over time, over the last 2+ years, we've seen a steady climb in audience. And in particular, we've seen when there are big breaking news moments, we are now at a point where millions of people are tuning into, I don't know if I should use the term tuning in. It's not really tuning in anymore, but they are going to NBC News Now to capture these breaking news events. So when you have big January 6th testimony, we've had 5, 6, 7 million people watching it on News Now. So I think that business is rapidly maturing. We're profitable. It's a viable business. This is not some pie-in-the-sky speculative venture. And then in terms of what kind of content people want, I think they want a range of content. I mean, News Now is a hard news product. It's straight down the middle, old-fashioned journalism without any bias. We have within the NBC News Group, we're fortunate that we have a rich portfolio. We have brands like MSNBC that offer perspective on a variety of platforms, which Rashida can speak to. But I think that that this transition, this generational shift, this technological shift has happened, and we're seeing the audience.
Yeah, I think your last point was a good one. It has happened. It's not coming. We're in a 10-year slow burn, but it's a slow burn nonetheless, and we're kind of in real time seeing the world around us change, the industry change. I know even for some of you guys, you're working in roles that didn't exist before. You're working on platforms that when we were all growing up didn't exist before, and so I think part of our objectives, and I think it's across the board, is how do we continue to maintain strength in our legacy operations, but how do we innovate? How do we create new opportunities for audience? How do we meet them where they are? How do we try to get slightly ahead of the curve with also acknowledging, and I think just chatting with Rick Jefferson about this, there's a lot we don't know. Like, we think we know where the industry is going to be in a year or 2 or 5 years, and we can prepare for that, but we've also got to be very nimble and prepared to pivot.
I will just say it's the most exciting time to be in our business ever. To me, yeah. It's like a playground. Yeah. There are so many things that we can do. We haven't even scratched the surface of it. So I think it's really, really exciting. ABC News, #1 on linear, #1 network in the country, right? But we also want to be #1 in streaming and digital. That's where the investment is going right now. So ABC News Live, Noah, you mentioned it. Millions of people, tens of millions of people. Over the last 3 months, 110 million people watched our news on ABC News Live. That tells you there's an audience there. And like you said, fast channels are important. It needs to be free to people. We want to be in the spaces so that people are getting real, straightforward news free. Everything can't be behind a paywall, so I do get that as well. But I think it's so exciting. Yeah. The possibilities are endless. Any kind of storytelling you want to do, there's a place to do it at ABC News and on all of our platforms. There's a place to do it. And so for journalists, for all of you in this room, you need to think about that. Because it used to be when we got out of school, we were trying to get to a local station and just get on a broadcast. But now, whatever if you can dream it, you can do it, you can be it, you can think it, you can do it. You know, really, there's a place for it. And you can create, yes, you can create your own possibilities as well, because we're open to it. We want to meet people where they are. So the world is open.
And changing.
And changing.
And changing.
But it's fun. It's great.
It's absolutely fun. You know, I left 60 Minutes to go to Yahoo many, many moons ago. Everyone said you're leaving for a company with an exclamation point. But it was fantastic because I got to learn a lot, you know, in terms of digital and how that space was evolving. It's changing a lot of things. I don't know about you guys, but our audiences on streaming are 25 years younger than linear. So, you know, you're talking about people in their 40s who have a long horizon and care a lot about the environment and space and longer term stories. And so how we program those channels is incredibly important. And it also gives you much more, at least for us, because we weren't in the cable news business, gives us an opportunity to sort of grow our live capabilities and to do more long form, which is where we really excel. And so doing those docs, doing those hours. And what's changed also is it used to be, do I really need to go do that thing for digital?
Yeah.
And now everyone's like, well, but I want to anchor that show on streaming, right? Because that is the future. And so for us, it all adds up to, you know, a digital first culture across the organization.
How long do you give it before, two questions, how long do you give it before streaming becomes the priority of your organization? And what's next after that? What do you see on the horizon beyond streaming?
Streaming is a priority of our
But I mean,
organization.
like the number one, like the,
Well, I think we're building that bridge. I really do. I mean, you know, we have to pay attention to linear because it pays the bills right now. It really does. You know, and even though the pie is getting smaller, that's where the dollars are. And we're just figuring out, and I think as an industry, we need to figure out faster how to monetize the other side, right? Streaming. But in the meantime, we have to build the bridge. I always say we don't want to become Kodak or Blockbuster, right? Just sort of, it's not happening,
We might
it's
have
not
to
happening,
translate
right?
that comparison to this
Oh,
room.
that's right. You guys might not know what Kodak and Blockbuster are, right? Well, Kodak, where you used to take film, and the digital cameras came and they didn't pay attention to that. They were like, no, we're going to stick with this film thing.
Yeah.
And then now that's why you don't know what Kodak is. So we don't want to become that, where we see this other thing growing over here, and we're still paying attention there. So we have to build this bridge, and I think both of them have to grow. But the investment for ABC News is over here, because that's what's growing, and we need to figure it out, and it's exciting. And Neeraj, you mentioned long form. We do 100+ hours of long form every year, 100+ hours on streaming for Hulu, Disney Plus, Nat Geo, our ABC News Live channel. That's a big investment. That organization, the long form unit, ABC News Studios, is huge. And it's valuable to the organization. And it also gives the people who are working on the shows, you know, diligently working head down on daily shows, it gives them a creative outlet. What else do you want to do? What else can you think of? You want to work on big projects. There's another place to do it. And a lot of people have really taken advantage of that, and there's a lot of value in it. ABC News Live, by the way, is the first streaming service to have 5 Emmy nominations this year, which I'm really, really proud of. ABC News has 41 Emmy nominations this year across all platforms, though. That's what's key. It's not just our shows anymore. Those are strong, but it's across all platforms. So it says to people, you know, do what you want to do. There's a place to do it, and you have a lot of runway here.
We'd like to move to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is core to these two host organizations. So first question to Rashida and Noah. Cesar Conde's 50% Challenge initiative, which aspires for newsrooms to be 50% women, 50% people of color. In the words of the legendary journalist Wendy Williams, how you doing?
I always know to expect some type of curveball with Byron. You know, we recently shared this broadly, but we're making incredible success with that objective. And when Cesar announced this 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, it was a bold announcement. It was an ambitious goal. But what I think it did is it set from the top down how this is a priority. It is not an option. It's not something that's in vogue for the moment. This is how we operate as an organization. And so since then, about 50% of our hires have been people of color. 60% plus have been women. We are actively working towards this, but it's also done from a place of not just checking a box. It's not a quota. It's not just a matter of, okay, as long as we have these numbers in some capacity, we've done the job. What I think we've really done, and you guys have seen some of that through NBCU Academy, is build an infrastructure where there is a pipeline from entry level to the executive level, where it is an expectation, it's how we do business, and that's across the portfolio, Noah.
Yeah, I think you captured it. And I think we've already seen the positive result of that in terms of our on-air product. I think that the conversation in the newsroom is different when it is more diverse, and the stories that surface are different. And so I think when you look across the content that we're producing for all of our platforms, I think that we've really been able to leverage that diversity towards great journalism. I mean, I'll cite, I talk about it all the time, Rashida's sick of me talking about it, but we did a bit of reporting in a town called Southlake, Texas, where a local school board was grappling with how to teach diversity and racial justice in their schools, and the community was essentially consumed with infighting and controversy and conflict, and it kind of became a great microcosm of how the nation was grappling with this whole topic of critical race theory. And we first started off by doing a piece of a published article on NBCNews.com. That became a nightly news story. That became a podcast. That became a digital documentary. And stories like that, and the ability of journalists like Antonia Hilton, who has gone there, has spent time in that community over weeks and months, and now years, those kinds of stories we would not be able to capture, we might not even know about if we didn't have a newsroom full of people from diverse backgrounds, not just racial diversity, but geographic diversity, ideological diversity. And so, again, I think the whole organization has seen that this 50% initiative is not only the right thing to do, but it is a tremendous competitive advantage for us in terms of the work that we do.
I'm going to throw out a question to whomever is brave enough to take it. And that is that in the life of every journalist of color, there comes a moment where a white, non-Hispanic peer is generous enough to share with you what they are making. And there's the aha moment of, I am not making as much as my peers. So as we have this conversation about 50-50 and about equity in the workplace, what mechanisms are you putting into place to ensure pay equity?
Sure, I'll jump in because it's something that we've actively worked towards in our organization, where we do studies to ensure that we're paying people fair. I think one thing when you hear diversity that often gets under discussed is the equity part of that too. And Yvette's team, I see you back there, Yvette. Yvette's team within the NBC News Group, they focus not only on ensuring that they're helping support systems to ensure that we're diverse, but the equity piece is a big part of that. So we do regular studies to ensure that people are being paid fairly. We set systems in place from an HR level, from a hiring level, from a talent acquisitions level, to make sure we're bringing people in an equitable space. So we're across the board treating people fairly. And to a point that you've heard up here multiple times, we're not doing this just for the sake of checking a box. We want to ensure that we're setting a foundation that's fair, that's equitable, and that's inclusive across the board.
That's funny that you said that. I remember when I got my first news director's job, my first goal was like, okay, where's the pay? Did I get the right pay for the job? And what did the person before me made? And the answer was no. I sold myself short. So I know what that feels like is. At ABC News, over the last year or so, we've done a complete pay equity study and right-sized salaries, just right-sized them. And we're still in the middle of, not middle, we're toward the end because we're almost finished, right, Tanya? I'm right-sizing the salaries. There were a lot of things that were off, and it was unfair. And so we just made it right. And to your point, we're now just finished a study of the marketplace, right? And so moving forward, we want to make sure we've done pay bands so that people will publicly be able to see where they should stand given their experience, what shows they're working for, what their titles are, and those will become public. I think it has to anyway by New York law, so we're working within that. But I'm a big believer in transparency. I really am, as much as we can. Caesar may have said 50%, but everybody was like, we want 50%. What did Caesar do? How come you guys aren't doing that? And I just decided that, the goals are good, but I'm just going to be transparent about where we are as an organization. So every quarter, I put up the numbers and talk with the organization about it. Just say, here's where we are. Here's how many people we lost, how many people of color, how many people we hired. Here's why. Here's where we see a problem. Women, I just put it up there, our numbers for the entire organization, and we talk about it. And I'm very clear when I'm disappointed in something that we are, a trend that we're seeing. But then it's up to all of us, right, to fix that. And I also want to be clear, this is not about tokenism either. I really don't, it's not about tokenism. It's about expanding the pool of candidates so it's representative of the country we serve. And then naturally, you will find people, And I will also say, people of color don't magically appear when you need them. And it's almost like people expect that. People of color are going to naturally appear because we need a this or that. No, this is an investment. It's a long-term investment. You have to really put in the work to get to know people, to come to conferences like this. I always say allyship is not something somebody can claim. It's something you earn. And the people that you are trying to be allies with, they give you that title. They say Kim is an ally. They say Rashida or Neeraj or Noah are an ally. We don't get to say that. But you have to put in the work to do it. That's what this is all about. Being transparent about it and putting in the work.
I was thinking when you're saying about the amount of work and the patience required, I think about Dr. King's words about the urgency of now. So this question is to you, Kim, Neeraj, and Rashida in particular. And I call this my Barack Obama question, my first black police chief question. When Obama was elected president, there was an expectation in black America. And then there was soon to follow deep disappointment in black America by him. For you as leaders of organizations of color, how have you managed, do you sense that pressure? Right, because when you come to these organizations that I would imagine for your employees of color, they are celebrating. And perhaps for your staff who are white, there's some fear. So how do you walk in the door and manage the expectations of people of color who've been thirsting for people who look like them, but yet meet an organization that is diverse?
I would say my take on this has been to just live in my own truth first and foremost. So the first that I had, and it's around the time that I met you for the first time, I was the first black news director in South Carolina. This was more than 10 years ago. And there was that expectation because it was at a time where I was a black news director, we had a black mayor, we had a black police chief, we had a black fire chief, and Nikki Haley was the governor.
Y'all were Atlanta.
No.
So you become Atlanta in that moment.
We right. Columbia turned into Atlanta,
right?
In drop of a dime,
right?
And and so going through that, and it was also around that time that I went to my first NABJ. Literally, my first week on the job was August 1st. The 3 days later, I was at NABJ. So I very quickly got immersed into this idea of back home, I am an unknown. I'm a first. There were some people, again, this is wonderful, beautiful South Carolina, unsure of what I brought to the table, but then I came here and there was this celebration. It was, I again walked in the door for the first time, met some folks, and they're like, wow, you're a news director, I can't believe this, and we're proud of you, and we're cheering for you. And then you fast forward to this conference, which is the first that I've attended, that we've had in person since I became president of MSNBC, and boy, I got that same love. You're the first, we're proud of you, we're rooting for you. And so I lean into that feeling of there's no expectation that because I'm here, I have to do things only for a certain community. I feel like the work that I'm doing to represent our community is being in the job and doing it well. And I think anybody who is in that support is more interested in me being a role model for them, their peers, the journalists who are coming up, than they are about me doing anything specifically just for one community. And I've just really lived in that.
I walked into ABC News and just talked about me as a person. It was, I think people were shocked. My first PowerPoint were pictures of my family. I told my whole story from, where I came from, what school, Florida A&M University, FAMU.
It took you this long to get
yeah, I know. I forgot it took me that long to get to FAMU. You all know I usually lead with FAMU. But in a newsroom where many people are not from historically black colleges and universities, right? And to stand up and just talk about my story. Here's where I came from, here's what I do. I like to run, here's my mom, she's a single mom, on and on and on.
She's a church usher, too.
And I'm an usher in my church, which reminds me just to stay humble. That's why I do that. You're no better than the lady you're trying to help to her seat. So I told all of that. And then I talked about the expectation around journalism. And I did that because I wanted everybody at ABC News to know that they could bring their authentic selves to work, and that I was interested in them as a person first. And when I looked at what are my goals and priorities for ABC News, the first one, I wanted goals and priorities, first of all, that people would remember and be able to recite. There were all these posters as I walked around that had all these wall of words, like all these grand things that they were going to do in 2021 and 2020. So I went around and said, hey, anybody know what the goals and priorities are? Anybody know what the sign says? No. And so I really wanted all of us to be able to rally around important goals and priorities. And the first one is easy. People are our priority. People inside this organization and the people that we serve outside the organization. And if you don't remember any of the other three, remember that one. And when, at the end, our culture is our superpower. We're driven, kind, inclusive, respectful, and transparent. So remember the culture is our superpower. Remember people are our priority. That's important. So when I think about me and this moment in history, I don't think about me. I think about all of those on whose shoulders I stand, and that's who I don't want to let down. There are many people, as I walked in this room, Paula Madison is here. Paula Madison. These are people who poured into me. Drew Berry, the executive director of NABJ, Dave Roberts, if he's here, he is at ESPN. These are people who poured into Kim Godwin, who I sat at their knee and asked questions and cried, and what should I ask for money, and what do I do with this, and what do I do with that? And walking down the halls of NABJ and NAHJ, that's where I got information. That's where I got the real thing. No, Kim, don't do that. No, you have to pay attention to culture. You have to do this, you have to do that. I got so much here. So that is in my ear because I can't let them down, right? And I don't want to just be the first black president in ABC News. I'm honored, I really am. I want to be the best. I want to be the most remembered. And that takes work. You have to put the work in.
That's a little bit of pressure here. I'll say to you, in terms of pressure, which I think where we began this question a little bit, I remember the first day I started at Yahoo News. I got all of these messages from Indian engineers asking to meet. And I had no idea because I knew nothing about engineering when I started. And so we got together at this orientation meeting, and I said, so what's going on? Because I got lots of ideas of things I want to build, and I want to know what I can build and how long things take to build. And they said, no, we just wanted to meet you. There's one of us on the content side.
Yeah.
And you really started to feel the responsibility that you have to people who have, run the same journey. And I will also say that to me, it's not about being first, because I'm actually trying to build on things that Kim started at CBS News, and working with Ingrid and Terry and all of their efforts, across CBS News. So this is just another step in an evolution in all of this. And I think that in terms of the pay equity and everything else, in addition to all of that, it's how do you knock down the walls to actually give opportunity, right? The inclusion piece of, you look at one of Shauna Thomas's pitch meetings on CBS Mornings, she wants ideas from everybody, from perspectives from every community, because our audiences are as diverse as we are. So, that's what you want to do. And, one of the opportunities, and maybe just to tease something, Valvin Patrick's in the room, who runs our race and culture unit. We're about to announce a primetime program on BET, where we're going to do, very big investigations, world-class interviews, feature stories. So, being able to create opportunities around people's ideas and give more opportunities is a really big thing for us.
You also have some big news out of Uvalde.
Yes, right. This is, and I talked about it a little bit before, Lily has been doing an incredible amount of work there. And going back to the communities, I was talking to someone last night about how Hispanics in the community don't even pronounce Uvalde the way everyone else does, right? And so really going deep in these communities are important, and people who come from these communities. So, this is going to be an hour-long documentary on CBS Reports with Lily and the team. So, again, we talked about this before, Kim talked about this before. It's about going back and representing these communities and having that common ground to not just dive in, dive out, but to be there.
If you go to Uvalde right now, ABC News has a bureau. We've opened a bureau in Uvalde. That's how important that story is for us to tell, and to be there as part of the community. A bureau that is staffed every day by the ABC News team. I wanted to add also about when you've been excluded, you know how that feels. And so I don't want anybody at ABC News to feel excluded. I want everybody to feel included. And so Soul of a Nation, which we were very proud of, it happened before I got there, 6-part primetime series on African Americans in this country, which was an extraordinary commitment by a network. When I got there, Soul of a Nation was about African Americans, about Black people, Soul of a Nation. And I thought it was extraordinary given, in light of George Floyd and everything that happened, the Black Lives Matter movement. And when I got there, I said, the Soul of a Nation is not just us, guys. The Soul of a Nation includes everybody in this nation. So we have to expand it. And I will tell you initially, the African Americans were like, really?
Oh, sis, it was stronger than that.
Right.
It was
right. But I stuck with it because it's sort of, we can't become people on an island just talking to ourselves. What good is that? We have to be inclusive. And so now Soul of a Nation, we went to Soul of a Nation. The next one was Corazón de América, which was, during Hispanic Heritage Month. That was extraordinary. And we just kept going, We just did one for Asian American Pacific Islander Month. We did one for Pride Month. That's the Soul of a Nation. And we'll keep going, and do it every year. But everybody is included in the soul of a nation. And, you know, so when you talk about, like I said, when I got there, the black people were like, huh? You knew? And I'm like, no, this is everybody. And we know what it feels like to be excluded, so we have to be inclusive.
Yeah.
No, I want to pick up on something that Kim said, which was this idea of giving people space to show up authentically as themselves. And I think for a lot of us who are first, only, different, that can sound like a dangerous dare. Like it is something that is meant for people who walk into the room and are assumed to be competent. And I think one of the ways that this manifests, particularly in our industry, is that, for example, if you are Latino and you are covering a story about immigration, that it is often coded as having bias or perspective, when it may be fact-based journalism. And so I wonder how you grapple in your newsroom with this really deep-seated bias that those of us who come from certain communities can't tell stories about our own communities and have it be seen and received as the journalism that it is.
I think some of that is setting the example as leaders. I think it's on all of us to present in our newsrooms, on our teams, as our authentic selves, so people understand that this is the expectation for how we operate. So I think that's number one. I think the idea, though, of having a newsroom that is representative of enough of your audience, that you're not just getting the story about immigration from your one or only Latino reporter. It can come from anywhere in the newsroom. I think you have to create a culture of open dialogue where you can equally pitch a story that may feel like it's something that's so specific to your culture, but you can pitch a story that has nothing to do with your culture and is accepted both ways. But I think it just comes from leadership. I think it comes from us setting the example. I think it comes from us being ourselves. And you know, Kim talked about that in her first day, and she gave the PowerPoint of who she is. I think we all have to kind of live in that space every single day, so people then can start behaving more like themselves. I'll give you an example of that. We were our group was at AAJA last week, was it? The time is flown very quickly, and we were at a dinner, and I shared this story. But I was on a video call with a group of leaders at NBC, and we were talking about just being the first different in their respective teams, and this was across NBCUniversal. And there was one woman who had been with the company for over 20 years. She said, "I have never said openly in a meeting that I went to Fayetteville State University because it's an HBCU, and I didn't want people to think differently about my education." And she said, I sat here, and I've heard you say it multiple times, talk about your experience at Hampton University, which is an HBCU. It is one of the best.
Yeah. One of.
I was trying to be inclusive. I was trying to be inclusive. It's one of the best. And she said, "I've seen you say that so often. I see the picture of Emancipation Oak over your shoulder. And this is literally the first time I'm in a work meeting and I talk about my own college experience." And she'd been with the company for 20 years. And I think part of that is, it's not me saying, I can put out a memo and say, "Okay, guys, it's okay to be yourself, and we're all different and whatever." I think it's living it every single day. And I think when you set a standard like that, when you set an expectation like that, when the folks who work with me know you're going to get the same version of Rashida at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and on the weekends, I think it then allows other people to be comfortable living who they are.
No, this is a question for you. I'm not sure how to phrase it. It's a bit delicate, I would think. But again, the spirit of Wendy Williams, like we now live in a. I've been coming to NABJ forever, since 1980, and whenever this conversation was, historically, it was 4 or 5 white men, maybe occasionally a white woman, having this conversation. But you're now sitting on the stage where you're the minority. What's that like for you, bro?
I mean, I'm having a ball. I think it's great. I mean, I think it's hard to feel anything other than excited by it and thrilled at the change that's overtaken our industry in the last few years and the country. I mean, Kim talked about inclusion. Rashida yesterday in another conversation mentioned how at NBC and I think a lot of organizations we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as kind of together as 3 principles that come together. And when you talk about inclusion, it does mean everyone. I think our organization has tried to live in that spirit. And what I've tried to relay to people, in those conversations where somebody raises concern is that you got to get over like the scarcity mindset. Sure. This isn't about if somebody gets something, you don't get it. It's about expanding the pie for everybody. And for a lot of reasons, including ones we've been talking about on stage, the expansion of platforms, the number of incredible storytelling opportunities that are out there, we can make this a much bigger, more diverse, more inclusive, more fair industry without anybody losing out. Everybody can win.
How have you had, if I may, a follow-up, how have you had to adapt your game? I mean, for all of us people of color in this room, we had to learn early on how to sort of adapt our game, how to adapt our presentation, because we came from a culture that the news industry didn't traditionally embrace. So have you yet had to adapt your game now that the world is changing, that now that your staffs are becoming more diverse?
I mean, I've tried to adapt my game my whole professional life from a spirit of humility in terms of everything that I encounter. I think meeting people as human beings, I love that framing of it. The humility of knowing that even if you're in a position of management, you're no better than your team. I've always tried to learn from the people around me and encouraged my team to behave similarly. I mean, I think that the more an organization can be non-hierarchical, I think the more an organization can exist in a spirit of collegiality, camaraderie, open-mindedness, and a recognition that none of us are perfect. And we mentioned earlier in the conversation the lack of trust in our institution. I mean, I think certainly ignoring the noise is always good advice. But I also think taking that input with some humility and recognizing that our industry has done some things wrong over the years to squander that trust, and how can we correct it? So I think that spirit of humility and adaptation should apply to all of us in every context, and certainly in terms of managing more diverse organizations, it's applicable there as well.
I just want to add to something on that, just to make this point. There were a lot of people, and I'm sure you guys have felt that, who said no to me, who looked over, passed over, stepped on, all of that happened during my career. But for every person that did that, there was somebody who also lifted me up, who gave me a hand, who helped me, who did let me in the meeting. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, everybody isn't out to get you, and everything isn't an us'ns versus they'ns kind of thing. I mean, to be honest, right, black and brown people don't run the networks. The people in charge many of them are not black or brown. And there are a lot of people who will reach a hand down and help lift you up. You have to be open to it, though. So it's not all, there were a lot of challenges, yes, but there were a lot of people who also gave me an opportunity, and that's all we ask for, is a chance.
This question, our last question about diversity, we're going to move on to the topic, is for Rashida and Khemlani. I'm mindful when you mentioned Paula Madison, that for many of us, there was a time in which Paula was the only.
Yeah.
And now we have you two sisters. We have this image of you two, image of you in your workspace. Talk for a moment. Shout if you want to. Two sisters from HBCUs, Hampton, Florida A&M. There are some of us in this room old enough to know that there was a point where you two were not possible, could not happen. And now here you are.
One thing I would say to that is I'm particularly appreciative, and I know we've talked about this before, that we get to do it together.
Yeah.
In very different ways. We have had our share of kikis over wine, text messages,
right.
But to be able to have that kind of that sisterhood and that support system. And the support system goes beyond us. I mean, you talked about it. We're here standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. But I think that support that we're able to give each other, but the Paulas, the Yvettes of the world are able to give us and to lift us up, I think for me is why we're able to do it. And I look at that, but I also look at, I have a 13-year-old daughter. I have a 16-year-old son. I'm doing it so this is normal for them too. I'm doing it, my daughter's the bossier one, so I could see her in a job like this. I'm doing it so Layla is breaking some barrier that we didn't know could be broken before. I'm doing it so John is supporting the next big boss woman in whatever capacity he can do. And like that motivation is for me what keeps me going, but it also is why I take the job so seriously. I don't want to screw it up for those who came before me, those who come behind me, and for those who are getting some morsel of motivation out of what I'm doing.
Yeah, when I look at Rashida, I've said this a million times to her before, I see progress. Because I was 57 when I got the job. She was 40-something. And so it's like, wow, we got there. Just 40, just 40. But she's just 40.
Add any more onto it than we need to.
But like 17 years, you know, I mean, so she got there earlier, and I'm so proud of that and here to support her in that. And that's what, you know, we talk about that all the time as we're texting and having a little.
And we don't always dress alike too.
I know, but a lot of times it happens. It is so weird. We're just you know, we're just gonna own it. It's fine. But yeah, so we do really help each other out. But I said this at another panel yesterday. I was sitting at the Four Seasons yesterday having breakfast, and I just started crying because I couldn't believe it. Like, I didn't even know what the Four Seasons was when I first started coming to NABJ. Didn't even know what it was. And I just couldn't, like, that moment of, wow, hit me. So I am so grateful for the journey that I've been able to have. And I just want to do it well. And I want to just be the best version of myself. And you said your kids, my daughters, I was a single mom most of their lives, and they were with me as we moved from newsroom to newsroom to newsroom. I worked in 10 local markets. They were there with their backpacks at the door. When breaking news happened, they knew to get the backpacks in their little sleeping bags, because that meant they were going to sleep in mommy's office. And they look at me, my daughter said the other day to me, she's like, Mom, I really don't know anybody who loves their job like you. Like, what is that? You know, she's 24 and she's like, who's paying me the most? You know, I'm going, like, she's not. But she just said, you really love it. And to see, like, they've been on the journey with me. There were many times that I was crying in my office, like, okay, I can't quit this job because who's going to feed my children, right? I can't let them see me sweat. I can't let them get me down. I've got to keep going. And so, yeah, my girls, our children motivate us, but all of you motivate me too. I don't want to let you down. I want to keep paving the pathway. I want you all to hurry up and get ahead of us, right?
Yeah.
And become billionaires so that we can answer your phones.
We can take a break.
If I may ask you a follow-up question to that. That also reality is that for many people in your organizations, in our industry, you're still not black enough. For, I would imagine for our Asian colleagues, our Hispanic colleagues, our white colleagues, they're like still suspicious of you and what you may need to do. Kim knows this. When she came to ABC News, the People of Color organization, we prayed for her, that we wanted. So what do you need from us? Because you are now in rooms that we've never been in. Facing things, answering questions we didn't know would be asked. So what do you need from us to help you too?
I think it's broadening the example of excellence. You know, we are here in our roles leading newsrooms, and what I need most, and you said this to an extent, is we just want to be successful in our work. We want to be successful where we are, but we also want our industry to start seeing more of us who look like us in these types of roles. And so I think it's really leaning in. You know, we don't want to be the only examples in these specific roles, but on whatever level and whatever role you're in, it's up to you also to bring that excellence to the table. So we're normalizing this. We're normalizing it together. We're normalizing seeing people who look like us in these conversations. We're normalizing decision makers being from a broader space. And I'll take prayers too. Always will take prayers. But I think it's all of us just kind of lifting that level of excellence normalizes this for everybody.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that prayer thing, because I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
Take that.
And continued. But what I need is for all of you to continue to just be there. You know, don't give up. Be resilient. Stay in the business. Don't let them deter you. You know, don't let people get you off your game. That's what I need, is more people in local newsrooms working, representing in your authentic way. And every time someone walks up and says, hey, Kim, you know, so grateful, or congratulations, that does pour into my spirit to also keep going. Because it can be a lonely place, and it can be a tough place. And so you remember when people say to you, you know, I'm proud of you. You inspire me. Because I remembered looking at people and doing that, like, wow, she's a producer, I can do that. And people don't realize, like, that really happens.
Yeah.
And it really means something. And so I just keep going. Guys, we want to look behind us and see all of you just coming. Because the profession needs you. True journalism needs you. And so please do that.
Let's get a big round of applause. Okay, don't sit yet. Don't sit down, because we got more. Okay, so our team clearly trusted us that this was going to be smart. It was going to be motivational. They did not trust us that this was going to be fun. So now we're going to have some forced fun.
All right.
Oh, okay,
Hope you're
fun.
excited. This is a speed round.
Oh, no.
Right? Questions.
Let's do it.
First job out of college.
Out of college. I started working in TV while I was in college. Barbara Sierra, if you guys know her, I was her producer my senior year of college, and I took off Monday because I graduated Sunday, and I worked early, and I went back to work.
WTXL TV, Tallahassee, Florida. This is our place. ABC affiliate. Full circle.
Full circle.
Production assistant for $14 an hour in Washington, D.C. for MSNBC.
I remember taking a subway from Queens all the way up to Westchester because someone was working, a 60 Minutes producer was working on a book about the Afghan